Hey guys, it's Mike here, and welcome to another LSC Q&A that I'm going to be bringing you here on Laughingstock Cinema, in which I'm going to be answering your subscriber questions. I asked you guys over here to ask me your questions for movies and live-action TV shows, and in this video, I'm going to be answering some of those to the best of my abilities. So, let's get started on here. So the first question is, have you ever watched Japanese live-action adaptations of different anime series such as Initial D, Bleach, Rurouni Kenshin, and so on? If so, do you recommend them? Honestly, I haven't seen any of them because, for the most part, I'm not a big fan of the live-action anime adaptations I've seen. Obviously I've seen Dragon Ball Evolution, and, I've seen some of the Death Note movie. I've also seen some of, Speed Racer, which, I guess I might check that one out again in the future, but as far as, most of them, no. It just seems like they never really do them well, although I have heard that Kenshin and maybe Initial D are pretty good, but for the most part, I'm not really that interested. I'd rather just read the manga or stick to the anime. Have you ever watched Forrest Gump? If so, do you like it? Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite movies. At one point, I used to know literally everything about that movie. I remember I went to a restaurant in New York City one time, which is Bubba Gump Shrimp, which is based on the shrimp company that Forrest Gump and Bubba create during the film. And, they ask you all these trivia questions, and I was able to get pretty much all of them answered correctly. We were at it for a while, though. Is Transformers: The Last Knight the worst comic book-based movie of all time? I don't know if I'd really count it as a comic book-based movie, but, it's definitely one of them if you want to. Great love and support from India. Well, thank you very much. I'm really thankful for my audience all around the world, including countries such as India. By the way, what are your expectations from the movie Venom? It's really up in the air. I want it to be good. I love Venom from the comics and the cartoons. I'm a big Tom Hardy fan. He's one of my favorite actors. But, it's Sony, and they're still trying to use it to create a Spider-Verse, they call it, and, there's just a lot of things that can go very wrong, and the trailer makes it seem like it could either be really awesome or really stupid, so I guess we're gonna have to find out. Thoughts on SummerSlam? There were definitely some good matches, the best match for me was probably Seth Rollins versus Dolph Ziggler, although I did like The Miz versus Bryan. I just didn't really like the finish to that. I talked about this on my Twitter, which you can check out at LSM Mike, but in terms of the overall show, I just thought there was way too many squash matches, and SummerSlam is supposed to be, I guess, the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, actually. So when you think about it from that perspective, how can you really have it be such a big, epic show, but barely any of the feuds ended there? It seems like almost all the feuds are going to continue on to another show, so it's just really kind of a weird place that they left us. And the main event and the actual ending of the show, it's awful. Really bad anticlimax, and as I said on my Twitter, Roman versus Lesnar is probably going to go down as one of the worst main event feuds in the history of the company. Okay, cool, thanks for your question. Do you watch Yu-Gi-Oh? Yeah, when Yu-Gi-Oh ran in the United States, I watched the whole series in English, and then I watched GX. At first it was in English, but the dub of GX is awful, and at the same time, they never even finished it, so, instead of continuing with the dub, I was just like, forget this, I'm gonna watch it in Japanese, and then I would watch it every single week when it would come out in Japan, so I kept up with that pretty well. I think I watched the first episode of 5Ds, and I just really didn't like it at all because I didn't like how they set it in the future. All the characters that we know are pretty much dead, I guess, and it's like a post-apocalypse where they're fighting, with card games on motorcycles. The whole thing just seemed ridiculous, but maybe I'll watch it again in the future. What other anime character would blend in with Dragon Ball? I mean, this is mostly for live-action TV shows and movies, but I guess, I think it'd be cool to see characters from, Hunter x Hunter or Yu Yu Hakusho in Dragon Ball, but in terms of, overall power, maybe, Saint Seiya, and maybe Tenchi, but obviously he's like, you know, at the least Zeno tier, so I feel like it's really difficult because of the power escalation in Dragon Ball, because you can add these other anime characters to the show, but if they don't do anything, if they're not actually fighters who can make a difference, then they're pretty much irrelevant, and that's kind of how Dragon Ball is. Do you think that the new Halloween movie will meet expectations? Also, do you think The Nun will be the best movie from the Conjuring universe? As far as the second one goes, I really have not seen the Conjuring movies. I probably will at some point, but, you know, for the most part, I'm kind of like horror movied out in recent years, and a lot of that's because almost all of them have the exact same premise. Let's go to a spooky house, or, oh, it looks like, you know, this house is haunted, or it looks like there is a little girl or somebody who's possessed, there's a doll that's possessed, there's a ghost that's a nun, you know, like, none of that really appeals to me for the most part, because I've seen it time and time again, and, you know, for a lot of them, it's just kind of either jump scares or just boring, so not really as interested, but, you know, maybe it'll be good. As far as the new Halloween movie, I don't even know what my expectations are for the most part. You know, I want it to be better than, like, The Curse of Michael Myers and Resurrection and the Rob Zombie movies, but, you know, like, I'd like it to be a great Halloween movie, but I don't know if it's going to be as good as 1 or 2. Do you think the Amazing Spider-Man movie franchise gets too much hate? The first movie is underrated, and the second one wasn't that great, but not as bad as everyone made it out to be. Sorry, Andrew Garfield, I know you were in those movies, but no, you were a pretty horrible Peter Parker in the first movie, although it's definitely better, I guess, than Spider-Man 3, even though I don't think that Andrew Garfield's as good as Tobey Maguire. But in terms of the second one, no. I remember the first time I was watching it, the whole movie, I'm just like, wow, this is horrible. How is it so bad? How is Jamie Foxx basically playing the Riddler who is playing Electro, you know? Like, how did they turn Harry Osborn in the Hobgoblin into, like, a meth addict, you know? Like, everything about it's just awful. So, no. They even ruined the Gwen Stacy death. They made it so overly dramatic, it just took all of the emotion out of it for me. Not to mention everyone saw it coming. So no, I think they're pretty awful. Do you think the Z Fighters will gather the Dragon Balls and wish everyone back who died in Infinity War? I don't think Shenron's gonna mess with Thanos with the glove. Let's see. Have you seen Final Space yet? No. What do you think? If you have, I haven't. As far as the Netflix show, in my opinion, it's alright. Okay, you're just keep talking about that. I've never seen it, but thanks for your question. So do you think that Goku will ever start to approach the angels now? It's possible, but, you know, at that point, what's there even left to do? Hopes and expectations for episode 9. I did a video on here on Laughingstock Cinema in which I discussed how there is a possibility that JJ can salvage the new trilogy and maybe help fix the franchise, but the problem is that, you know, it's really going to be a hard task for him to do that, and it really depends on the story and how they execute it, because Rian Johnson really left him with a really difficult position. Have you ever watched Breaking Bad? If so, what are your opinions on it? It's probably one of my favorite shows. I've seen it through many times, and it's great. You know, I love Bryan Cranston in it. You know, I think that he's really great. Definitely a very underrated actor, and it's kind of a shame he hasn't done more since Breaking Bad, but not too sure why exactly that is. You know, they put him in Godzilla, but that didn't last very long. So, you know, definitely a great show, not a perfect show. There are flaws, including some of the main characters, but for the most part, I do think that it's pretty great, and I don't think Better Call Saul is really living up to it, which is a shame because I was looking forward to it, but spin-offs are pretty difficult. All right, big fan here. Thank you. Have you seen the new Mission Impossible? Yes, I reviewed it on here, and it was great. I think it was probably the best one of the entire franchise, so make sure to check that review out. What do you think is the best incarnation of each Justice League member shown in the Justice League movie, counting animated interpretations as well? Yeah, probably the Timmverse, and, you know, maybe a close runner-up would be, like, I don't know, Grant Morrison's run from the 1990s JLA. You know, those are probably my two favorite versions of the Justice League. So one of those. I tend to lean towards the animation because the Timmverse was great. And I would like it to come back because, you know, I'd much rather see that version than the version that we're getting in the movies. And then, you know, obviously, unfortunately, the Teen Titans and soon to be the Titans. What are your thoughts on Sith Lord Jar Jar Binks? Would it be funny to see? It might be funny, but it would also be ridiculous and make the prequels even worse. So, you know, it's a funny meme, but that would be absolutely stupid beyond belief if that actually were to happen. Have you ever watched any of the CW shows? The Flash, Arrow, Black Lightning, etc.? Yeah, I've seen Flash, Arrow, some of Supergirl, although at the time I think it wasn't on CW. And then I also have seen most of Legends of Tomorrow. I haven't seen all the most recent seasons that they've added to streaming, but, you know, for the most part, I like them. I really like Arrow and The Flash the most, you know, but the thing is that I feel like with The Flash and some of Arrow's seasons, they're not quite as good as they have been in the past. Like, Arrow for me started to kind of go downhill around, I guess, the 4th season. I know a lot of people don't like the 3rd season because they don't like the whole changing how Arrow is now involved with the League of Assassins as opposed to Batman, but I thought that was pretty cool. But season 5 I thought was pretty good from what I saw. As far as the Flash, you know, the best villain is the Reverse Flash, and then we have Professor Zoom, I think, and then we have the villain of the 3rd season, and I just don't think that they really were as compelling as the villain of the 1st season. So they kind of gone downhill. They shove a little bit too much ham-fisted politics in there, but they definitely have their good points. How do you think Batman would do in UFC? He theoretically had the physique of Alistair Overeem in his Ubereem days pre-USDA. You know, I think Batman would dominate the UFC because he's Batman. The guy, you know, he could beat freaking Darkseid if he has enough prep time. At least, obviously, a Darkseid avatar as opposed to his true form. But the fact of the matter is that Batman against real people, you know, he's a big dude, he would have a great physique, and he's super strong, at least by human standards, so he'd pretty much wreck, I feel like. Final question, what movie TV character could benefit the most from a year of training on King Kai's planet? I don't know. I mean, imagine if you took Arnold from Commando and put him there. Like, he would just be able to be sent single-handedly to fight in, like, the biggest wars on the planet, and he'd come away without a scratch, you know? Maybe a little scratch, but that's about it, you know? Bruce Willis as John McClane, obviously, he'd probably do really well on King Kai's planet. It's pretty difficult. Batman, like we talked about him before, but then again, most of these people are just regular humans and they don't know how Ki works or even understand what the concept is, so I'm not too sure that any of them would benefit so much as just die a horrible death. But that's a different story for another day. Better Gail Garcia Bernal road trip movie performance, Y Tu Mama Tambien, or The Motorcycle Diaries. I haven't seen either of those, unfortunately, but, you know, you seem more qualified to answer that than I am. Who wins in a fight, John Wick or Daniel Craig's James Bond? That's a really good question. You know, John Wick, especially in the second one, is so dominant. You know, we're going to have to, I guess, wait for the next movie just to see how dominant he is against other assassins, but you know, Daniel Craig's James Bond, he's been involved in such ridiculous things so far. You know, he's gone to levels higher than John Wick ever has, so I kind of give the edge to Bond because he is James Bond after all. But, you know, John Wick would do really well in the fight, I'm sure. What is your favorite movie? Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Best soundtrack from 2018, and what movie would actually benefit if it were in black and white instead of in color? Keep up the good work. Thank you. Now, best soundtrack, that is kind of difficult to answer, but I think maybe of the films I've seen so far this year, probably something like Black Panther, because it had some of the catchiest songs of the year. In terms of what movie would benefit the most from being in black and white instead of color, that's a pretty good question. Now, you know, do you mean more modern films that benefit, or do you mean films from like 10, 20, 30 plus years ago? I feel like a lot of detective films might do well in black and white, like something like Seven perhaps, or, you know, maybe even Blade Runner, although I feel like color and its palette is kind of a big part of establishing the atmosphere of that film. But then again, they have movies that have loads of color in them, like Mad Max Fury Road, and they have Logan that are also in black and white. So, you know, black and white, even though back in the day it used to be because of technology limitations, now it's something more about style. So, you know, even though obviously color films can look great, I have noticed that with black and white, especially when the films are upscaled, you seem to have far greater depth of field and far more detail than you do with many films that are in color. But that might be something I'll talk about a little bit more in the future on this channel. What are your thoughts on the live-action Lion King movie that comes out next year? I really don't see the point. Well, I see the point. Obviously, it's a big property, so they're remaking all of their classic animated properties, and obviously it's going to make them a good amount of money. Disney is a business, and they're pretty good at it. But you know, like, how are you going to do a live-action Lion King? Like, are all the lions and animals going to be CGI? And if that's the case, then what's the point? Because you might as well just make another animated movie or a CGI movie. But, you know, are there going to be human characters in it? Like, if so, what are they going to do? Are they going to be just mauled to death by the lions in the first 5 minutes and then everything else is CGI after that? I'm really not too sure. But I'm not really that interested in seeing it either. The Aladdin movie, on the other hand, might be a little bit better because it actually deals with humans, but, you know, we'll have to see about that. Are you interested in Fantastic Beasts 2: The Crimes of Grindelwald? It hits the UK this November. Yeah. Big fan of the Harry Potter franchise. I've read all the books and seen all the movies. And, you know, I've always been interested in the backstory of Grindelwald and, you know, his relationship with Dumbledore, basically him becoming the first evil dark wizard, the pre-Voldemort, basically. So, you know, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing them flesh that out. Even though Johnny Depp is kind of on the downslide these days, I feel like, you know, he's still a great actor and maybe he's kind of having a slump. So we'll have to see how that works out, but he might be able to play Grindelwald very well, you know, as long as he doesn't make him too goofy, I guess. And I pretty much just answered this. I've seen all of them more than once. Do you think Daredevil season 3 will end the show? I doubt it will end the show, but I feel like, you know, it's been great so far. There were some issues in the second season particularly that, you know, I still think, you know, it was a good season overall. So if they do end it with a third season, as long as it's a strong third season, that'd be fine. But at the same time, I do want to see more Daredevil, and I would like to see Daredevil in the actual MCU as opposed to just, you know, with the Defenders universe, because they're supposed to be connected, and I don't really care who's running which division or that division. I just want to see them in the same universe, and it should be a lot simpler to do that than, say, bring the X-Men in. Have you seen Christopher Robin? No, and I'm not sure if I'm going to, but I do like Ewan McGregor. What are your thoughts on the Hotel Transylvania movies? I haven't seen them. What are your thoughts on Black Mariah in Luke Cage Season 2? I think she's a really underrated villain. I would put her up there with the Kingpin. I think that she was good, although honestly, I liked Cottonmouth more, and I liked the Bushmaster more. So, you know, Mariah was really good, but at the same time, you know, I guess I liked the other secondary villains, you could say, a little bit more than her as the main central villain. Plus, I actually liked Shades really a lot, too, as the villain. I don't think any of the villains have really come close to the Kingpin, unless we're going to count the Punisher, who, from that perspective, if you want to call him the villain of that season, then maybe you could say that he's the best. But Kingpin, you know, it's pretty hard to top him. Do you think that DC should recast Ben Affleck? Because in my opinion, I think Ben is the best Batman right now, and they should not recast him, and Ben Affleck needs to stay as Batman, just saying. You know, I don't want them to recast him. I think that he can really be a great Batman, you know, especially if, you know, he really gets to put everything into it as opposed to kind of phoning it in. The Justice League, I think that he did a good job as Batman, but it's mostly the content that he had to work with. He was good also in Batman v Superman, but again, it's more about the writing surrounding him. You know, it's kind of like Jared Leto as the Joker. A lot of people didn't like Jared Leto as the Joker, but I think that's just because of the film that he was in and the fact that it didn't focus on him as the main villain, you know? Like, if Christopher Nolan directed Jared Leto as the Joker, it'd be amazing, probably. You know, Jared Leto is an Oscar award-winning actor for a reason. So I think that seeing him in his other films over the years, he could be a great Joker, and Ben Affleck, I think, could be a really great Batman. Is he the best one so far? I mean, I don't really think I would agree with that just yet. Regardless of which live actor plays him, it's probably still going to be Kevin Conroy who's the best, but, you know, that's another story. Do you think the Avengers 4 movie is going to be better than Avengers Infinity War? It's going to be tough for them to make it better. You know, they could always mess it up at the very end, which I'm hoping they don't. But, you know, the thing is that when it comes to the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, and I guess you could say the Infinity War storyline, they only kind of told like half of it. They told the part where Thanos actually gets the gauntlet, he assembles all the gems, but they haven't really told the counterattack story yet. When the Infinity Gauntlet storyline begins, you know, Thanos has the snap, and it's after the whole Thanos quest in which he went around all the different dimensions gathering the stones from all the different guardians of the stones, basically. But then you have the snap, and then you have the Silver Surfer encounter Thanos, and then he goes to the Earth, and he basically plays the Hulk role from the movie, where he tells the Doctor Strange and the other Avengers about how Thanos has the gauntlet, and then they go to war with Thanos in his own place. You know, basically, he could kill all of them in an instant if he wants to, but he's doing it to appease Death and try and impress her. So he, like, dampens his own senses, and a massive, like, force of all the heroes and all the villains team up to fight him, you know, so they haven't really done that yet. They've only really done, like, the heroes defending, but they haven't shown them actually going out to where Thanos is and fighting him for that gauntlet. So, you know, I feel like that's what they could do, but at the same time, I heard that they're going with, like, a time travel idea, and they might actually, like, create another gauntlet, which I'm not too sure if I'm a fan of that idea, but I guess we'll see what happens. What do you think about the DC animated movies, and do you think they should be in theaters? I'm not entirely caught up on all of them. I've seen all of them up until, like, Justice League War, maybe? I don't really know which one exactly, but, you know, most of them are really good. You know, I also saw The Dark Knight Returns, which was a pretty great adaptation for the most part, so should they be in theaters? If people are willing to go see animated movie in theaters, sure, but a lot of people seem to be shifting more towards the streaming market nowadays, which, you know, for people who like the theater experience like myself is a little disappointing, but, you know, maybe in the future, maybe in the wake of stuff like the Broly movie, which is an animated movie that's going to be in theaters, an actual 2D animation instead of just 3D and Pixar and things like that, then it could kind of cause a resurgence. But, you know, we'll have to see how that plays out. And finally, what are your thoughts on the new version of Godzilla / Giant Monsters verse? And do you think that a fully grown Kong can beat King Ghidorah? I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. You know, it's kind of dumb for King Kong, who got killed by a bunch of bullets in the original movie, to have ever fought Godzilla like he eventually did in the original King Kong vs. Godzilla movie. And the fact that he actually won in the American version by drowning Godzilla underwater, despite the fact that Godzilla mostly lives underwater, was ridiculous. I've never bought the fact that King Kong, of all creatures, could be able to fight somebody like Godzilla or some of his really powerful villains, but, you know, maybe if he teams up with Godzilla, he could provide some sort of threat, especially the new one, who seems to be even bigger than ever. But, you know, like, what do I think about it? So far, it hasn't really been that amazing, you know, like, I always liked Godzilla when I was a kid, but, you know, I haven't really been really drawn to this new universe as much. But, you know, Godzilla King of Monsters looks cool, and if that ends up being really good, then sure, bring on King Kong versus Godzilla. But I'm not too sure how King Kong is going to fare, but knowing these Hollywood versus movies, they'll probably have it end in a draw, and have 90% of the movie be focusing on human characters that nobody cares about in the least. Alright guys, so this has been another LSC Q&A that I've been bringing you here over on Laughingstock Cinema. What are your answers to some of these questions? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.